The rain came down so hard that night it looked like the whole city was crying. Cars rushed past with their headlights blurred by the storm. People hurried along the sidewalks with umbrellas over their heads, too busy to notice anyone else. But near a small bus stop on the corner of a dark street stood an old man trembling in the cold, soaked from head to toe. Most people walked right by him. Until one exhausted waitress, carrying nothing but a broken umbrella and her own worries, stopped for just a moment. And that single moment of kindness changed two lives forever. If stories about kindness, hope, and humanity touch your heart, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and leave a comment below sharing the kindest thing someone has ever done for you. Welcome to, where every story reminds us that even the smallest act of kindness can change the world. Emily Carter was 28 years old and tired of life. Not the kind of tired sleep could fix. The deep kind of tired that sat in her chest every morning when she woke up. She worked double shifts at a small diner in Chicago, barely making enough to pay rent for her tiny apartment. Every day felt exactly the same. Wake up. Work. Smile at rude customers. Count tips. Go home exhausted. Her father had passed away 3 years earlier, and since then, life had become painfully quiet. Her mother lived in another state, and most of her friends had moved on with their lives. Emily often felt invisible in a city filled with millions of people. That Thursday night had been especially difficult. A customer yelled at her because his coffee was cold. Her manager blamed her for an order mistake she didn't make. And just before closing time, Emily learned her landlord was increasing her rent again. By the time she finally left the diner, the storm had already flooded the streets. She pulled her thin jacket tighter around herself and began walking toward the bus stop. Her shoes splashed through puddles while thunder echoed above the city skyline. That's when she saw him. An elderly man sitting alone on the bench. His clothes were soaked. His hands shook violently from the cold. Beside him sat a small worn-out suitcase that looked older than she was. People passed him without looking twice. Emily almost kept walking too. She was exhausted. Broke. Hungry. And honestly, she felt like the world had never shown her much kindness anyway. But something about the old man reminded her of her father. So she stopped. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked gently. The man looked up slowly. His pale blue eyes were filled with embarrassment. "I'm fine," he whispered. "Just waiting for the rain to slow down." Emily glanced at the empty street. No buses were running in this weather. "You'll freeze out here," she said. The old man forced a weak smile. "I've survived worse." Emily hesitated. Her apartment was tiny. She barely had enough groceries for herself. Bringing a stranger home sounded crazy. But then she remembered something her father always used to say. Kindness matters most when it's inconvenient. Those words echoed in her mind as rain poured around them. "Come with me," she finally said. The old man looked shocked. "Oh no, I couldn't." "You can," Emily replied softly. "At least until the storm passes." For a moment, the old man looked like he might cry. He nodded quietly. Emily helped him carry the suitcase through the rain. They walked 6 blocks to her apartment building, climbing 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken again. When they entered the tiny apartment, Emily immediately handed him a towel. "It's not much," she said apologetically. But the old man looked around like she had invited him into a palace. "It's warm," he whispered. "That's more than enough." Emily heated canned soup on the stove while the old man dried off. "My name is Emily," she said. "Walter," he replied. They sat at the small kitchen table eating soup while rain tapped against the windows. For the first time in weeks, Emily didn't feel completely alone. As the storm continued outside, Walter slowly began to talk. His voice was calm and gentle, the kind of voice that made people feel safe. Emily learned that Walter was 72 years old. Years earlier, he had owned a small bookstore with his wife, Margaret. They had spent decades building a peaceful life together. Then Margaret got sick. Cancer. Walter's eyes became distant as he spoke about her. "She was the kindest person I ever knew," he said quietly. Even near the end, she worried more about others than herself. After Margaret passed away, Walter sold the bookstore. Without her, the place no longer felt like home. His only son had moved across the country years earlier, and over time their relationship faded. Walter admitted he hadn't spoken to him in almost 5 years. "I suppose loneliness can slowly make people disappear," he said sadly. Emily understood that feeling more than she wanted to admit. For hours, they talked about life, loss, dreams, and regrets. Walter listened carefully when Emily shared her struggles. Unlike most people, he didn't interrupt or offer empty advice. He simply listened. And somehow, that meant everything. Around midnight, Emily gave Walter her bed while she slept on the couch. Before turning off the light, Walter looked at her and smiled warmly. "You remind me of my wife," he said. Emily laughed softly. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is," Walter replied. "The highest one I can give." The next morning, the rain had stopped. Sunlight spilled through the apartment windows for the first time in days. Emily woke to the smell of coffee. Walter stood in the kitchen holding 2 mugs. "I hope instant coffee is acceptable," he joked. Emily smiled. For a few moments, the apartment didn't feel lonely anymore. After breakfast, Walter packed his suitcase. "I should go," he said gently. Emily suddenly felt sad. The strange thing was, this man had only been in her life for 1 night, yet somehow his presence had filled an emptiness she didn't realize was so deep. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay?" she asked. Walter nodded. "I'll manage." Before leaving, he reached into his pocket and handed Emily a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" she asked. "Just something for later," he replied. Then he paused at the door. "You showed kindness to someone when you had every reason not to," he said. "Never lose that part of yourself." And then he was gone. Emily unfolded the paper. It was an address. Along with a short handwritten note. "Please visit tomorrow at noon. I'd like to show you something." Emily almost ignored it. But curiosity stayed with her all day at work. The next afternoon, she finally decided to go. The address led her to a quiet neighborhood lined with beautiful old buildings. At the end of the street stood a bookstore. Emily froze. The sign above the door read, "Margaret's Corner Books." She stepped inside slowly. The smell of old books filled the air. Wooden shelves stretched across the cozy shop, and soft jazz music played quietly in the background. Walter stood near the counter smiling. "You came." Emily looked around in confusion. "I thought you sold the bookstore." Walter nodded slowly. "I did. But recently, I bought it back." Walter invited Emily to sit beside the large front window overlooking the street. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Walter looked at her seriously. "Last night," he began, "I wasn't actually stranded." Emily blinked in surprise. "What?" Walter smiled gently. "I was driving through the city when my car broke down during the storm. I sat at that bus stop for almost an hour." He looked down at his hands. "Dozens of people walked past me. Some stared. Most ignored me completely." Emily stayed silent. "But you stopped." Walter's eyes filled with emotion. "You didn't know who I was. You didn't expect anything in return. And even though life has clearly been difficult for you, you still chose kindness." Emily felt tears sting her eyes. Walter continued softly. "Do you know how rare that is these days? The bookstore suddenly felt very quiet. Then Walter said something Emily never expected. "I need help running this place." She stared at him. "What?" "I'm getting older," he explained. "And honestly, this bookstore deserves someone who still believes in people." Emily laughed nervously. "I don't know anything about running a bookstore." Walter smiled. "You know kindness. The rest can be learned." Over the next several weeks, Emily began helping at the store part-time. At first, she only organized shelves and helped customers find books. But slowly, something changed inside her. People smiled there. Neighbors talked to each other. Children sat on the floor reading stories while parents drank coffee near the window. For the first time in years, Emily felt like she belonged somewhere. Walter became the father figure she had deeply missed. And little by little, the bookstore became more than just a business. It became a home. Months later, Walter made another surprising decision. One evening after closing, he handed Emily a set of keys. "I want you to have them," he said. Emily looked confused. "The store?" Walter nodded. "You brought life back into this place. Margaret would have adored you." Emily's voice shook. "Walter, I can't accept this." "Yes, you can," he replied gently. "Because kindness should continue moving forward." Tears rolled down Emily's face as she hugged him tightly. That small act of compassion on a rainy night had completely changed her future. Years later, Margaret's Corner Books became one of the most beloved little bookstores in the city. But what made it special wasn't just the books. Near the register sat a small handwritten sign that read, "If you see someone struggling, stop and help." You may be changing a life without even realizing it. And every time Emily looked at that sign, she remembered the stormy night when she almost kept walking. Kindness doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes it happens quietly. One stranger helping another. One warm meal. One conversation. One moment of compassion when it's least expected. But those small moments can echo for years. So the next time life gives you a chance to be kind, take it. Because you never know whose life you might change. Or how it might change yours forever.